The Third Side of the Coin, brought to you by Excalibur Coaching and Consulting.
Welcome to part 1.
Hello, and welcome to the Third Side of the Coin podcast, episode 6, The Impact of Ambiguity. My name is Alex Aberle, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Tim Wong. I'm the president of Excalibur Coaching and Consulting, a leadership and career coaching firm that partners with current and aspiring leaders going through career transition and looking to find ways to build a world of better leadership. My co-host Tim Wong is a content curator focusing on thought leadership for YPO and defining learning themes for programming globally relevant top leadership learning events. He is also an international faculty of the Art of Living Foundation and the International Association of Human Values. He's been teaching courses since 2003 on consciousness and meditation, specializing in the corporate leadership workshops.
Thanks for joining us again this week. So this week's podcast is on ambiguity, and you will soon discover that Alex and I covered everything and anything under the universe, and that's all part of ambiguity because you just don't know. But at the same time, you had the curiosity to go and explore. That is ambiguity, and that's how you address ambiguity. So we hope you enjoy this podcast. If you like it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and check us out. Thank you very much.
I'm so excited about the topic of our conversation today, as we wanted to talk about ambiguity in general and the effect that it has on our behaviors and attitudes, and how to really approach dealing with ambiguity to avoid negative impact on personal life. By definition, ambiguity is the quality of being open to more than one interpretation or inexactness. And the ambiguity effect is a cognitive bias where decision-making is affected by a lack of information. And the effect implies that people tend to select options for which the probability of a favorable outcome is known over an option for which the probability of a favorable outcome is unknown. Due to current global events, there just seems to be quite a bit of uncertainty about the future, which in a way brings a lot of ambiguity in the way we hear leaders and large organizations relay their messages about the future to their employees. And some of my past and current clients are quite anxious because the future is so unclear. They see ambiguity in communications. Ultimately, it just intensifies the worries and anxieties about the direction that they are going to take or trying to take. They will say, I'm not sure whether I'll have a job, or I'm not sure where my business would survive. What does ambiguity mean when it comes to an individual well-being from your point of view, Tim?
Well, ambiguity for an individual is the fear of failure. And it happens to everyone. So the fear of failure is also when you're faced with multiple choices or more than one choice, both seen as attractive or both seen as unattractive, and you are made to make a choice on it. But if you look at everything we do, it's either this or that. You have to make a choice. And it's being able to sail through ambiguity. It's tough. It'll be foolish to say, you can breeze through it. But it's part of the learning cycle, and it's part of growing and becoming strong in whatever you do. I guess that's what you see in great leaders, is the way they deal with ambiguity or uncertainty is that they're certain about themselves, is that they will keep performing regardless of what the situation happens. And if you keep giving your best, then at the same time for that result, the best thing will happen given that situation.
You know, when you mentioned great leaders, I would look at it probably also as experienced leaders who took those chances and chose to fail but learn from those mistakes. The way each person looks and reacts to ambiguity depends on our personality, which consists of attitudes, beliefs, actions, and behaviors more than it does on our genetic disposition, because we mentally and verbally tend to label ourselves. We find ourselves going through life acting in accordance with who we believe we are. Yet, if we were to start making shifts in our beliefs and identity, all aspects of our lives could change, including our personality and the way we react to ambiguity. Some individuals who have what they call brooding mind, those are the individuals who make the worst of ambiguity. What I mean is, some people have high neuroticism. Neuroticism refers to an individual's tendency to respond naturally with negative emotions to negative experiences such as threat, frustration, anxiety, stress, or loss. And ambiguity can easily trigger those negative emotions. I think it's important to realize that there's a distinction between personality and identity. And we've talked about identity in our previous episode. Personalities are susceptible to changing conditions, states of mind, circumstance, shifts in beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes, whereas identity tends to be a core system which we allow to grow and in turn alter our identity accordingly based on circumstances and experiences. And the depth of the insight we have about ourselves determines how we go on to interact with other people. So, Tim, with this said, what approaches to dealing with ambiguity would you recommend to someone who is highly stressed and perhaps is trying to avoid negative impact on their personal life, but just can't get there right now?
Yeah, I think from a spiritual perspective, it's the expectations you put on yourself and the responsibilities that you have. So when we're faced with ambiguity, sometimes just stopping and observing yourself, you would realize that the uneasiness we have with ambiguity is the expectations we've set up ourselves to have. So the expectations we put on ourselves in terms of how we show up, and that expectations, when we start going deeper into it, is really the way we want to project ourselves, right? But sometimes the way we project ourselves is based on how we think other people see us. And so it's actually driven in trying to live up to an expectation of what you think other people are perceiving that you should be living up to. So it's sort of like 2 degrees separation already.
You've mentioned stop and look, I guess, at yourself, not quoting you, but how do you do that? How do you observe yourself?
It is meditation. Many people ask me what's the difference between prayer and meditation. Prayer is you're asking, you're demanding. It's a petition, right? Meditation is where you stop and listen. So you're listening to a higher being or the universe or consciousness or the voice, whatever you want to call it. That is what it's all about. It's being able to stop, sit down somewhere, close your eyes, so that you're not distracted by external stimulus of other sort, and just be able to focus on how you're feeling, the sensations in your body. So say, for example, you're nervous, people say you have butterflies in your stomach, or you're feeling anxious, your shoulders begin to contract or feel very tight, or your chest feels very tight. So the body in many ways is an expression of what your mind is thinking sometimes. So in some traditions, it's not mind over matter. It can be mind over matter, but at the same time, it doesn't also mean that I'll get well, and you don't go and do anything about it. That's not it either. So observing yourself or seeing how you're feeling is really what is happening within me right now, that emotions, that fire, that coldness, and then be able to then start associating with things that begin those trigger points. So when people say, how do you deal with ambiguity? You have some extremely evolved individuals saying, well, it's all about dispassion and letting go. I mean, it's very easy to say that, but when you're passionate about something, and life is passion, how can you let go of it? Different personalities with confronting ambiguity will approach it in a different way. Or what is similar to everyone is the opportunity to stop and then observe. Observe what's happening in my thoughts, what's happening in my emotions, what's happening in the way I'm feeling, and writing it down and seeing whether it is rational or not. But a lot of times we don't write it down. Journaling is such a powerful method. If we don't journal or we write something down, it just keeps spinning or churning in our mind. Through experience, you realize whatever you just keep in your mind, it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can't find your way out. And in your coaching, you do mind mapping and things like chart it, write it down. There's a purpose in that, because that allows what is very cerebral or very that's just thoughts, that you can put it down on paper, and it makes it a lot easier to deal with in some ways. So it's, for example, is it easier to learn to ride a bicycle by riding a bicycle or reading a book that teaches you how to ride a bicycle?
Yeah, experience.
It's the experience. So, just going back to how do you deal with ambiguity, it is very much about experience. It's about leadership as well, leading yourself, and you see that it's like no one's a natural born ambiguity expert.
Right.
It comes from experience, and it's the same as people saying, "Oh, that's a natural born lead." No, leadership is a skill. It is by experience that you become a great leader. When you see great leaders who are young, then you see, yes, for that age group at that time in that level, it is great leadership they're showing, but they still do not have that depth of experience, the wisdom that comes from it. So there's leadership, and there's leadership with wisdom, which most often they become mentors, which we talked about last week, about being the best in the world and being the best for the world. When you become a mentor, you become the best for the world.
That's fascinating. And I want to actually get back to the very beginning of what you were saying. You've mentioned something that is very popular. It's almost like a fashion statement: mind over matter. Some people use affirmations. Would that also be something that people can do?
Yes, I mean, positive affirmation is just positive reinforcement that Skinner talked about, one of the great psychologists. But don't let that become a crutch. Yeah. Just say one day you wake up, you go to your mirror, and then your post-it note has already slipped away. Is the world going to end? No. It'll keep continuing. Are you going to end? Well, we don't know. I mean, no one knows. One thing for all of us out there to understand is we live with ambiguity every day. But we don't know that we're going to wake up. We take that for granted. Do we actually know that the sun will come up the next day? We don't know. So there's a lot of stuff that we take for granted that becomes part of our routine. So ambiguity is when we feel our routine will be disrupted and we're uncomfortable with that. We don't like that. And that's what the pandemic, the global pandemic we're seeing right now, has disrupted routine, and people are uncomfortable about it. The pandemic has helped us embrace ambiguity in different ways. It's forced us to rethink what we've taken for granted, which is routine. And that routine can be our relationship. For example, people are now becoming closer to your neighbors because you're realizing that you took them for granted. That is part of the thing that no one likes to talk about ambiguity, because everyone wants to feel that they're in control. And if you talk about ambiguity, people feel that you're weak in some ways because you can't make up a decision. True strength is actually diving deep into questions that people are afraid to ask or not supposed to ask, because that's how you grow.
Here more, go to part 2.